Welcome back, Chappelle. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of the unification of Germany, right? So we left off in class talking about how Germany is going to begin to combine itself into a very, very brand new country, right? How it's going to go from all these little German-speaking principality states to form itself into what you would now call Germany, right? And it's going to do that by 1871, okay? But going into it, though, we're now going to pick up where we left off in class, talking about how the Napoleonic Wars and the era of Napoleon is going to kind of help get the ball rolling towards that direction, right? So we're going to go ahead and clip in this flip and stuff like that we're going to do to talk about that because this is what I've been using for the last 3 years because it's really, really good. But I'll talk to y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. About it, though, is we left off in class talking about the Napoleonic Wars and how the occupational forces of Napoleon's armies will inspire nationalism, right? Because all these people that live in these German-speaking territories don't really like being told what to do by French-speaking soldiers, right? And it inspires this big idea. Well, the thing about it is Europe is going to go from looking like this in 1812 to by 1815, Napoleon losing at the Battle of Waterloo and all of that land being left up for grabs. And we got another title on our hands because I went through this whole thing so you can better understand it. So going into it, though, then the Congress of Vienna is going to be held, right? So we're actually, of course, talking about that same meeting that we talked about before where the conservatives and the classical liberals and the socialists and all that stuff actually popped up, right? Well, the thing about it getting into it is the Congress of Vienna is also going to kind of advance forward the idea of a unified Germany because at the Congress of Vienna from 1814 to 1815, which is actually a series of meetings, not just one, the Congress of Vienna did discuss creating a unified German state after they split up what Napoleon had taken over. Because the thing about it is what used to be there in this big chunk of German-speaking principalities was the Holy Roman Empire. But the Holy Roman Empire is gone now. And since it's gone, they actually renamed it. And they called it now instead the German Confederation, right? Because as you can see, the German Confederation is formed. So this big chunk of territory right here gets turned into what's called the German Confederation, okay? So the thing about it is that the Congress of Vienna, they actually made it easier to create a unified German state without actually originally ever intending to do so. Because back when it was the Holy Roman Empire, it was 90 different principalities that were all led by different people and different local princes and stuff like that. And the Congress of Vienna is going to take that number down to about 38, all right? So and actually basically divide it by 3, making larger territories that will be ruled by a larger prince or something of the like. And basically, in general, what's going to end up happening is there's just less land to take over, right? The issue with, though, is that y'all are like, Mr. Terry, well, if they had talked about creating a unified German state at the Congress of Vienna, why didn't they just do it? Well, a lot of it has to do with that balance of power aspect, right? That concert of Europe thing that Clemens von Metternich was actually leading at the Congress of Vienna, right? The thing about this whole deal at the Congress of Vienna is they didn't want They didn't want Prussia or Austria to get too strong, right? The idea, though, they were like, okay, we can't give all that land to Prussia because it'll make Prussia too big. We can't give all of it to Austria because it'll make Austria too big. So we're going to keep Austria and Prussia where they are, and then there'll be a bunch of little German Confederate states or whatever, okay? Well, then the thing about it is, though, is that means that those two areas of Prussia and Austria might have a wild hair and be like, why don't we unite all this stuff together, right? And Prussia is going to be the one to do it. Now, Prussia at the time is going to kind of create a little bit of dissentiment, a little bit of a rivalry with Austria. But the thing about it that we now need to start talking about is how this guy named Otto von Bismarck. We're going to fast forward now, okay, from the Congress of Vienna happening in about 1815. We're going to fast forward all the way up until the 1860s, right? We're going to jump forward because Prussia and Austria were chugging along for a while. But then this guy named Otto von Bismarck shows up. And he becomes the Chancellor of Germany. And he decides to unite all the German-speaking places together into a German empire, right? And he also leaves Austria out of the plan, right? Big thing that we need to remember right there, okay? That Otto von Bismarck was the Chancellor of Prussia, not actually the Chancellor of anything else or whatever, or like Chancellor of Prussia, then becomes the Chancellor of the German Empire, and he leaves Austria out of the plan because he's like, the Austrians are Catholic and they have too much money and they also control all the other people that don't speak German. So the big thing about it, though, is I'm going to clip in the flip from last year that actually does a really good job of explaining how Bismarck managed to unify the German states together using 3 key wars. The Second Schleswig-Holstein War, the Austro-Prussian War, and then the Franco-Prussian War as well. But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all watch this, do your study guide, email me with any questions you have, and also pay special attention to that study guide because I think I'm going to add a timeline to it a little bit, and then also some key figures. There's not that many people on this test. academic, there's only about 10 matching people on your test. By the way, pay attention for a special email that's going out as well. It's going to discuss when everyone's review sessions are and how you can get in touch with me leading up to your test. But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Right, so we're getting into a title notes, or part of your notes, but fast forward to the revolutions of 1848. The revolutions of 1848 that took place in the state of Prussia were actually demanding a unified German state. The classical liberals and the socialists were looking towards the idea of creating a unified German state, particularly the classical liberals, right? So the German politician that is going to show up and rise out of the ashes of 1848, and even though he was pretty conservative, decides that he too believes that a national German state should happen, is a man by the name of Otto von Bismarck, also known as the Iron Chancellor himself, right? The Iron Chancellor Otto von Bismarck wants to unite the German states together, with Prussia being the leader, leaving Austria behind in the dust, right? He directly wanted to create what he called smaller Germany, or like not lesser Germany, but small Germany. Small Germany is a German country that actually has Prussia at the lead and is going to unite all the former German principalities that used to be a part of the Holy Roman Empire. Greater Germany would have been Austria at the lead. Bismarck wants to avoid that because of the nationalities that the Austrians control, and he wants to see a true German state be united. And he's such an important guy that he's got a t-shirt. His name is Otto von Bismarck. He's the Iron Chancellor. Blood and iron is his game, right? So now the big thing about it, though, is how is he going to pull this off? Well, the thing about it is Otto von Bismarck, as being pretty conservative in and of himself, but understanding that the wants and the desires of classical liberals and socialists are going to be an issue, he actually decides that he wants to start practicing this concept known as realpolitik, right? Or realpolitik, which is an issue or a concept, the idea of not being like romantic about your politics, not trying to get everything you want, knowing that politics have to be based on current needs, right? That basically in the long run that Bismarck knows he wants X, Y, and Z, but he knows he's only going to be able to get X and Y, right? He's willing to let Z go and give it to the liberals or the socialists and allow them to have these things. But he also knows the only way to unite Germany together is going to be by using a realistic mindset. How are you going to do this and pull it off rather than trying to pull off this grand romantic notion of what you think Germany is supposed to be, right? So in the long run, this could be seen in a really big speech that he gave to one of the actual Landtags, one of the parliaments of the former Frankfurt Parliament, one of the parliaments of Prussia, and he stood up there and he said, "The questions of the day will not be answered by pen and paper. They will be answered by blood and iron," right? And basically what he's saying is he's calling for authority and military strength. And what he's asking them to do in this sense is he's basically saying we need to raise taxes to build up our military so we can prepare to unify the German states together. Now, basically what's going to happen, though, is the Landtag or the middle-class parliament is going to say, we don't want to do that. But he's just going to go over their heads and say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Because he has the support of this person, the Prussian monarch, Wilhelm I, who is himself a Hohenzollern, right? So now here's the thing you need to understand. Otto von Bismarck is not a king. He's not a monarch. He is not that guy. He is not a Hohenzollern. He is the man known as the Chancellor, right? He's basically Wilhelm I, the Prussian monarch's right-hand man, right? He's the guy that is going to help him and aid him in the growth of the German state. But he is not himself a king like this man is, right? This is the man who is the king. That is Wilhelm I, the Hohenzollern leader, who shares the same beliefs as Otto von Bismarck does and wants to see a united German state happen, right? And so they decide to up taxes on everybody to build up a bigger military, and they're going to begin to attempt to annex or take control of other German states, right? Now, here's an interesting thing. You can annex by one of two ways. Annexing, you can do one by taking them over by control forcefully. That was a thing that several people in Europe have done in the past. Napoleon annexed things by force. Other leaders later on are going to annex things by force. Stalin will annex things by force. Hitler will annex things by force. But Bismarck doesn't want to do that. He wants to actually pull them in by bringing them in willingly. He wants to annex them into the Prussian territory to keep creating this German area or this German state by convincing them that they want to be a part of Prussia, by convincing them to just kind of be like, hey, little guys, come on over here and join us, okay? But the question is how? How are you going to gobble up, if Prussia is right here in blue, how are you going to get all this green, all this yellow, and all this other lighter blue to join up in this idea that you want to create known as Germany? How are you going to pull this off? Well, he wants to annex them in a very unique way. He wants to do it, but through a series of wars. But it's an interesting thing. He's not attacking those places. He's not attacking the German states and bringing them in by force. He's attacking other people, making those German states feel like they're safer and better off with Prussia, right? So the very first war that he fights is this war known as the Second Schleswig War, right? Now, when you say these two places, it's called Schleswig and Holstein, right? So here's the idea behind it, all right? So we're going to zoom in on this map really quick. But there was two, the countries involved are Prussia, Austria, and Denmark, right? So Denmark controlled these two provinces after the Congress of Vienna. The two provinces are called Schleswig and Holstein. Say it with me now. Schleswig and Holstein. Say it with me one more time. Schleswig and Holstein. Those two places spoke German, but were controlled by the Danish king in Denmark. And Denmark decided that they wanted to write a new constitution that would bring Schleswig and Holstein into their kingdom permanently. But Bismarck's like, no, no, no. They speak German. They do German things. They are a German group. We want them to be with us. So he decides to convince Austria, who also speaks German and who also has German culture, to go to war against Denmark to make Schleswig and Holstein want to join with Prussia and Austria, right? And they go in, and in 9 months, Prussia and Austria win this war. Duh, because they're really, really big, and also because the entire time Prussia has been building up its military, and they've always been a very strong military power. So they win this war very quickly, and Schleswig becomes a part of Prussia, and Holstein becomes a part of Austria. Now you've got an issue, and Bismarck's like sitting there, he's tapping his feet, and he's like, so I got Schleswig. But now I got to get Holstein, right? So because he doesn't like the fact that Austria has Holstein. But here's the problem. Do you want to directly go to war with Austria necessarily? They've been around for a really long time. But the thing about it is he decides, I'm going to make some of these other German states think Austria is attacking us, right? And so he threatens Austria and says Austria is trying to instigate another war. And what ends up happening is then the Austro-Prussian War breaks out, right? About a year and a half after the Second Schleswig War, the Austro-Prussian War breaks out. Because what he wants to do is he wants to go to war with Austria, beat them quickly, and he wants to convince a bunch of these other German territories in the north to join up with Prussia, right? See what I'm talking about? At no point is Otto von Bismarck declaring war on any of these German-speaking principalities. He's declaring war on other people that kind of control them, trying to convince them to come and join this new beautiful idea that it will be Germany one day, right? He's like, look at us, German principalities. Prussia is the group you want to join. You want to be with us. You want to see Germany happen. We all speak the same language. We share the same culture. Come and join us. We'll protect you, right? And he does this successfully in the Austro-Prussian War as well. About a year and a half later, this bad boy only lasts 7 weeks, right? Prussia is able to enter into this war and just smack Austria in the mouth. Austria didn't really want to be in the war very much in the first place. Holstein was very far away from them. They didn't really necessarily need it at all. They also weren't in this trade customs union that the Prussians had called the Zollverein, so it didn't really make much sense for them financially. And also because the Germans had a new weapon, right? So this gun is a massive thing that turns the tide of the weapon. Honors kids, you need to write this gun down. The Western Civ kids, you're going to need to be able to reference it. But it's called the Dreisse needle gun. So this gun, Prussian soldiers had it, while Austrians still had muskets, right? Muskets take a long time to load. You got to have the gun, you got to pour the powder in, you got to ramrod it down, you got to put the bullet in, you got to ramrod it down. You got to take the paper, you got to put that in, you got to ramrod it down. And then you got to pull it up and shoot it. And the best Austrian soldiers in the world could fire maybe 2 shots a minute using a musket. But the Prussians, showing their industrial nature and their military nature, had a scientist in their place in their country that actually invented this gun, and his name was Dreisse. And Dreisse invented a thing called the needle gun. This is a semi-automatic breech-loading gun. So instead of turning the gun up and pouring everything down the barrel, you see this little bolt right here? You would kick that up and pull it, and then slide the bullet in through the bottom of the barrel. Click, got it, bang! And then you would just do that over and over and over again. An untrained Prussian soldier with a Dreisse needle gun could fire about 6 shots a minute, while the best trained Austrian soldier could only fire 2 shots a minute with his musket. So the Prussians are going to use this technology to overwhelm the Austrian soldiers, and they're also not going to force Austria to pay war reparations. They're going to keep them on their side. They're going to be like, look, Just go mind your own business. And they do. Austria leaves them alone. They move on. And now this is what Prussia has created. They call it the North German Confederation, right? So they were like, no more German Confederation, North German Confederation. And so they create this big new district up top. But as you can see, there's this dinky little orange area down here that they got to get control of, right? Now here's the issue with the orange area. The orange area is called Bavaria. And they have a religious divide, right? They got to figure out how are you going to recycle Bavaria, this last big speaking German area, into your empire when they don't really want to come in there with you because they're not the same faith, right? Okay, so it's just to keep in mind, the Reformation is still throwing kinks into a lot of stuff, right? So you got to understand that this entire area of the North German Confederation were Protestant. Bavarians were very wealthy, but they were also very Catholic. So they didn't want to join up with the North German Confederation, which was a Protestant majority. They were like, look, we'll just keep being Bavaria. We got castles and pretty stuff and all this other money. And they've had a king for a long time before that named Crazy Ludwig and all this other stuff, who actually built a castle that is actually designed, was the inspiration for the Walt Disney castle. It's called Neuschwanstein. It's the one thing, like this castle, I'm not even kidding, is the one word in German that Mr. Wooderson knows, right? So the Neuschwanstein castle was in Bavaria, and it's just kind of a good image of like Bavaria was very, very Catholic and very, very wealthy, right? So they didn't want to necessarily join the German, like North German Confederation immediately. So they've got to figure out how can I get these guys to join up with us without going and fighting them. And what they decide to do, get someone to declare war on you that they also don't like that much. Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So like, who is the enemy of Bavaria? The French, right? Like so, because remember, German speakers and French people aren't getting along right now ever since Napoleon took them over. When Napoleon comes in and enforces French culture on the German speakers, they start to heavily resent them. And so we got to figure out a way to get France to declare war on us so Bavaria will be like, don't fight them, that's not nice, and then join up with you, right? And they do this successfully because the Franco-Prussian War breaks out and it lasts for about 9 months, and it's against that guy Napoleon III, Napoleon's nephew, right? So what ends up going down, though, is Prussia ends up winning and overwhelms France completely, and it all started over a text message, basically, over a telegram. Because it was like this whole crazy thing with, like, there was a, like, Spanish, like, vacancy on their throne, and, like, so let me put it to you this way. Here's how Otto von Bismarck pulls this off, right? Otto von Bismarck pulls it off by trying to figure out a way to convince France to declare a war on the North German Confederation. Spain, their king, died with no heirs, right? So they had a succession crisis. The person that was about to take over the Spanish throne was a dude by the name of Leopold, right? Leopold was cousins with Wilhelm I, the Prussian king, right? And so basically, Napoleon III didn't want to be surrounded on both sides by people loyal to Germany, and especially as the North German Confederation was growing. So what he does is he sends a telegram to Wilhelm I saying, hey, tell your cousin not to take the throne in Spain so we can avoid war and things like that. Wilhelm sends a telegram back to Napoleon III, but it gets intercepted by Bismarck. And Bismarck changes the telegram to make it look as if Wilhelm blew Napoleon III off and was like, get out of here, Frenchie. And what ends up happening is Napoleon III, who is now so insulted and it gets printed all over newspapers and sent all over Europe, feels embarrassed and declares this war. And it's the Franco-Prussian War. That telegram was called the Ems telegram, right? So the Franco-Prussian War breaks out 9 months and Napoleon III loses big time, right? Mostly due to the fact that France had not nearly as intense of an infrastructure, their military wasn't as strong, and also their technology wasn't as good. But this is the telegram that was like sent back and forth that started the entire war, right? That's the telegram that Otto von Bismarck edited to make it look like Wilhelm I, the Prussian king, was talking junk about Napoleon III, the French emperor, right? Like so, and that is going to be the thing that ends up starting the war. And this right here is actually a picture of Napoleon III and Otto von Bismarck sitting together because the one big battle that they actually fought against each other was called the Battle of the Sedan, and Bismarck like wiped out all of his forces and stuff like that. So that's them sitting together. But when that actually happened, what's going to end up going down is that the French people are going to get so mad that like Napoleon III lost this battle and embarrassed them and all this stuff that they're going to kind of barricade themselves in. And I'll talk about this menu in class a little bit when we get there. But in the long run, the Franco-Prussian War breaks out of 9 months and a bunch of French people had to eat zoo animals. So like, okay, I'll just tell you now. So what ends up going down is Otto von Bismarck beats Napoleon III at a very large battle in the Franco-Prussian War called the Battle of the Sedan, right? Well, Paris and France, being very Paris and France-like, say, well, he's not our king anymore. And they decide to, like, just make him, force him out. And they're like, we're not ruled over by Napoleon III anymore. And so they create a barricaded society inside of Paris. And Paris refuses to surrender. So here come the Prussians. The Prussians come in, surround the city of Paris, and they're like, look, we're not going to kill a bunch of women and children. So we're going to wait until you decide to surrender. And so they blockaded the city of Paris. Well, this is going to cause Paris to run out of a lot of food. And so what they end up doing is Paris, being the French, decide that they refuse to surrender until they absolutely have to. So to find food, the Parisians went to the zoo and started eating the zoo animals, right? So, like, as you can see, the hors d'oeuvre right there is rats and sardines, and then right down here, you can see that they're eating a consommé of elephant, they're eating kangaroo, they're eating anything they can have just so they don't have to surrender to the Prussians, right? But what ends up going down, though, they eventually surrender because they actually basically are going to starve, and now you got yourself a German Empire, right? Because Bavaria joins up with the Germans, and you have the birth of the German Empire. Wilhelm I, is a very last little, we don't like you to the French, decides that they were going to become a country in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles. So ironically enough, Germany became a country in the Palace of Versailles, which was a dramatic insult to the French. And Wilhelm took on the title of Kaiser, or Emperor, of all German states after winning that war against France, and they became a country in 1871, right? And so this event, where you can see Wilhelm I and Otto von Bismarck standing there in the crowd, and everyone's saluting the new German Emperor, Wilhelm I, Kaiser Wilhelm I, this can help lead to a big world war that's going to happen in the next unit. But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. I'll talk to y'all soon. Study hard and kick this test butt, all right? Y'all have a good one.